Have you ever had a day so bad that you actually started laughing at yourself because crying just didn't feel like enough? I need you to hold on to that feeling because that is exactly where this story begins. Welcome to Daddy's Revenge. I'm so glad you are here. If you're new, hit that subscribe button right now because the stories we tell here are real, they are raw, and they will make you feel everything. I mean everything. Get comfortable. Maybe grab something warm to drink. And please, leave a comment below telling me what you think. You're going to want to talk about this one. My name is Frank Caldwell. 13 months ago, I had a manufacturing company that I had built with my own two hands over 22 years. We made parts for medical equipment. Real work. Important work. Work that I was proud of every single morning when I walked through those factory doors. I had 41 employees. 41 people who trusted me to keep the lights on. I had a house on 3 acres in rural Ohio, a house I had painted myself twice, a house with a garden my late wife Margaret had started, and I had kept going for 6 years after she passed. That house was not just a building. It was her. And then in less than 4 days, a supply chain fraud that one of my business partners had been hiding for 3 years came crashing down on top of everything I had built. The government froze our assets during the investigation. It did not matter that I did not know. It did not matter that I was the one who had actually reported the irregularities when I noticed them. None of that mattered when the bank called. I was 63 years old. I had just started taking blood pressure medicine. My doctor had told me to reduce stress. I laughed so hard at that memory that I scare my dog. Reduce stress. Sure, because the part that really sits heavy on my chest, even now, even after everything that came after, is not the factory. It is not the house or the garden or the 22 years. It is my son Marcus. He is 32. He lives in a big, beautiful house in a suburb outside Columbus with his wife Tanya and their little girl Layla, who just turned 4, and who used to call me Papa Bear because I always wore flannel. I helped Marcus with that house. Not a little. A lot. I co-signed a mortgage. I gave him the down payment as a gift because I told him fathers do not loan money to their children. They give it. I told him that with my whole chest, proud as anything. So when I packed what I could fit into 2 duffel bags and drove 3 hours to Columbus with nowhere else to go, I was not asking for a miracle. I was not asking him to save me. I just needed somewhere to sleep. I knocked on that door on a Thursday evening, the sun going down, feeling like I had aged 10 years in 4 days. Marcus opened it and looked at me the way you look at unexpected mail, not sure if it is good or bad. "Dad, what are you doing here?" He stepped onto the porch and pulled the door halfway shut behind him, which told me everything before he said another word. "I have nowhere to go, Marcus. The house is gone. Everything is gone." His face did something complicated. Not hard, exactly. More like something behind his eyes was doing math really fast. "I heard what happened," he said quietly. "I've been meaning to call." He had been meaning to call. The man I had stayed up with through a week of fevers when he was 8, the man I had driven 14 hours round trip to help move into his first apartment, had been meaning to call. "Marcus," I said, just his name. I could not get more than that out. He looked at his shoes. "Dad, Tanya, she is not really in a place right now. We're having someone stay over. It is complicated. Her mom has been sick and the house is already stressed, and I am your father," I said. Very calm. Very quiet. "I know," he said. And then, while I was standing there on the porch of the house I helped him buy, with 2 duffel bags and no home, my son said, "I am really sorry, Dad." And he went back inside. The door clicked shut. I stood there for a moment. Then I walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel, and I did not cry. I laughed. Not the happy kind. The kind that comes out of a person when the universe has gotten so absurd that your body does not know what else to do. I reclined my seat as far as it would go, which was not very far because I had boxes in the back, and I pulled a jacket over myself like a blanket, and I slept in the driveway of my son's house. In my car, at 63 years old with a bad back and a blood pressure problem and a garden full of my dead wife's roses being taken over by strangers. I want to tell you that I had some profound, peaceful moment in the dark. I did not. I mostly just stared at the ceiling of my car and listened to Marcus's neighborhood settle into quiet around me. A dog barked somewhere. A sprinkler came on. Ordinary Tuesday night sounds for everybody else. I fell asleep around 2 in the morning. I know because I checked my phone, which was down to 11% battery, and which I did not have a charger cable for, because I had grabbed the wrong bag in my rush to leave the house. You know what is humbling? Realizing the small things you forgot. Not the big losses, the little ones. I fell asleep thinking about a phone charger. I woke up to someone knocking on my window. My first thought, before I was even fully conscious, was cop. And then I thought, great, I'm about to be asked to move along from my own son's neighborhood. I sat up and blinked, and the man outside my window was not a police officer. He was tall, silver-haired, somewhere in his late 50s, wearing a dark navy suit at what was apparently 6:45 in the morning. He was holding 2 paper coffee cups and standing with the posture of someone who had never once in his life been told to wait. He knocked again. 3 knocks. Patient and precise. I rolled down my window. The morning air was cold and smelled like someone nearby was already cooking breakfast, which was both wonderful and cruel. "Mr. Caldwell?" the man said. I stared at him. "Frank Caldwell, formerly of Caldwell Medical Components." "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded like gravel. He held out one of the coffees. "My name is Thomas. I serve as the personal representative of Mr. Elliot Marsh." He paused the way people pause when they expect a name to land. It did not. "I apologize," I said. "I slept in my car last night. I don't know who that is." Thomas blinked once, slowly, like a man recalibrating. "Mr. Elliot Marsh," he said carefully, "is one of the largest private landowners in the American Midwest. He holds significant interests in infrastructure, clean energy, and agricultural technology. He is also," Thomas paused again, "terminally ill. He has perhaps 3 to 4 weeks remaining according to his medical team. He is in the process of finalizing his estate, and he has made a very specific request to meet with you before those documents are complete." I looked at the coffee in my hand, then at Thomas, then back at the coffee. "Thomas," I said, "I want to be honest with you. I have about $40 in checking account that is not frozen. I have not showered. I have no house, no business, no plan, and my son just turned me away last night. I look exactly as bad as I feel. I genuinely cannot imagine why a dying billionaire would want to see me before signing his will. There must be a mistake." Thomas looked at me with the calm of a man who had navigated complicated situations before. "Mr. Marsh was informed of your circumstances before I was sent here," he said. He said, and I am quoting directly, that your circumstances were precisely the reason he wanted to speak with you today. He reached into his jacket and handed me a cream-colored card with an address printed in simple black letters. "There is a guest suite at the estate where you are welcome to freshen up before meeting Mr. Marsh. He does not care about your appearance, but I suspect you might." I looked at that card for a long time. Then I looked back at Marcus's house. The curtains in the front room moved slightly, the way curtains move when someone is watching from behind them but does not want to be seen. I looked at Thomas. "All right," I said. The drive to the estate took 40 minutes. We went northeast, out of the suburbs, into rolling countryside that I had not seen in years. Thomas drove a black car that was very quiet, the kind of quiet that money buys, and he did not try to make small talk, which I appreciated enormously. The estate appeared at the end of a long gravel lane lined with old oak trees. The house was not flashy. That surprised me. It was large, yes, but it looked lived in, real, the kind of place where the furniture was chosen for comfort and the rugs had seen some years. Thomas showed me to a guest room that was warmer and quieter than anywhere I had slept in a week and left fresh clothes on the bed without being asked. I stood in the shower for longer than I should have and tried to organize my thoughts. I could not organize my thoughts. I gave up and just stood under the hot water until it started going cold. When I came downstairs, Thomas led me through a hallway lined with photographs, not of famous people or grand events, but of ordinary moments. Farms, faces, handshakes in fields. Elliot Marsh was sitting in a wheelchair by a wide window in a sunroom at the back of the house. He was smaller than I expected, the kind of man who looked like he had once taken up more space in a room, and the illness had been quietly returning it. His hands were folded in his lap. His eyes, though, were sharp and very blue and fully present. He looked at me when I came in, and his face did something warm. "Frank," he said. His voice was thinner than it probably once was, but there was strength underneath it. "Sit down." Please, Thomas, the coffee, if you do not mind. He waited until we were alone before he spoke again. You don't know me, he said. It was not a question. No, sir, I said. I am sorry. Don't be. I have spent most of my life making sure people did not know me. It felt safer. He looked out the window. The oak trees outside were starting to go gold at the edges. But I know you, Frank. I have known of you for a long time. He reached to the side table and picked up a folder. Plain manila. He set it on the table between us, but did not open it. 26 years ago, he said, I was not this. He gestured at the room, the house, the window, the whole life beyond it. I was 51 years old, and I was broke, and I was driving a truck that was breaking down more often than it was running. And I ran out of gas on Route 30 in a December ice storm at 11 o'clock at night. I went very still. He continued. My phone was dead. My heater was broken. And I sat in that truck, and I thought, this is it. This is where the story ends. I was not being dramatic. I was genuinely frightened. And then a truck pulled over behind me. A blue pickup. And a man got out. He was maybe 40 years old. He had a gas can in his truck bed because he said he always carried a spare. He filled my tank. He waited while the engine turned over. He would not take any money. I asked him his name. Elliot paused. His blue eyes came back to my face. He said his name was Harold Caldwell. He said, you drive safe now. Roads are ugly tonight. And he drove away. The room was very quiet. I opened my mouth and then closed it. My father, Harold Caldwell, had been dead for 9 years. He had driven trucks his whole life. He had always kept a gas can in the bed of his pickup every single winter because he said you never knew when someone was going to need it, and it cost almost nothing to be ready. He had told me that, told my son Marcus that. It had been a family rule so ordinary we had stopped thinking about it. He was my father, I said. My voice was not quite steady. Elliot nodded slowly. I know. It took me some time to find him. By the time I had enough resources to look, Harold had passed. But I found you. I have been watching what you built for a long time, Frank. Your company, the way you ran it. 41 employees and not one layoff in 22 years. He tapped the folder. I had people look into you. Not to pry, because I needed to know who you were before I decided what I wanted to do. And now here you are, sitting across from me in circumstances that are, I will say frankly, very bad. He almost smiled. And I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this out of charity. I'm not doing this out of guilt. I'm doing this because your father stopped on a road in a December ice storm and gave me the night I needed to keep going. And because everything I built after that night, Frank, started from that gas can. He pushed the folder toward me. I looked at it, did not touch it. What is in there? I asked. The beginning of a conversation, Elliot said. I opened it. Inside were 3 things. First, a letter from Elliot's legal team outlining a proposed arrangement. Second, a financial summary that I read 3 times because the numbers seemed impossible. And third, an old photograph, grainy, taken at night, with the yellow wash of headlights. 2 men standing by the side of a road. One was tall and broad-shouldered in a flannel coat. He was facing away from the camera, but I would have known those shoulders anywhere. My father. The other man was younger, thinner, standing with his hands in his pockets, and looking at my father like the man had just walked out of a story. Where did you get this? I asked. There was a highway camera a quarter-mile back, Elliot said quietly. I had someone find the footage. I had that printed years ago. I held the photograph for a long time. My father had been a quiet man. He did not talk about the good things he did. He just did them. He had a whole philosophy about it. Actually, he used to say, Frank, you don't help people so they will remember you. You help them so you can sleep at night. He slept very well, my father. Even at the end, I set the photograph down carefully. What is the arrangement? I asked. Elliot folded his hands. I want to fund the rebuilding of your company, he said simply. Not as a loan, as an investment. I will put in the capital. You will run it. Any profit splits between your workers' fund first, then you, then my estate. There is also a house. I looked up. A house. I own several properties. One of them is a farmhouse in Wayne County. It has been empty for 4 years. It has a garden. I had to look out the window for a moment. The oak trees were still there, gold and patient. There is a condition, Elliot said. I looked back at him. There is always a condition, I said. He nodded, and I thought I saw something like respect in those sharp blue eyes. There is a man, he said, a former business associate of mine. His name is Douglas Finn. He was my partner for 11 years before I discovered he had been systematically routing company funds into private accounts. He did it to 3 other partners before me. He has never faced any legal consequence because he is very careful and very well connected, and the people he does this to tend to be too embarrassed or too exhausted to fight. He paused. I believe he was involved in what happened to your company. I felt the room go very still around me. Not quiet. Still. The kind of stillness before something moves. Your business partner, Elliot said carefully, the one who was running the supply chain fraud. He worked for Douglas Finn for 2 years before he came to you. I do not believe that was a coincidence. I thought about David Reyes, my partner of 7 years. I thought about the way he had always been slightly too smooth, slightly too good at explaining things away. I thought about how much I had trusted him. What do you want me to do? I asked. Elliot opened a second, smaller folder. I want you to take a seat on a board. A private investment group. 7 members. I founded it 15 years ago. The seat is yours if you want it. That seat comes with access to certain information. And certain people. What kind of people? I said. He looked at me steadily. The kind who can make sure Douglas Finn answers for what he has done. Legally. Thoroughly. Without him being able to smooth it over or buy his way out. I sat with that for a moment. Outside, a bird landed on the windowsill and looked in at us with great seriousness, then flew away. I need to think about it, I said. Elliot nodded immediately. Of course you do. You just woke up in your car. This time he did smile, fully, and it changed his face entirely. Made him look younger. Thomas will show you to a room. Stay as long as you need. There is no timeline except mine, and I intend to be difficult about dying for at least another few weeks. I laughed. A real laugh, not the unhinged kind. The first real one in days. I spent the rest of that day walking the estate grounds, which was less like walking and more like trying to get my whole body to believe the morning had actually happened. Thomas appeared at regular intervals with food that I did not ask for and quiet check-ins that felt like company without the pressure of conversation. He was very good at his job. That evening, I sat in the library and read through the full legal documents. I'm not a lawyer, but I have signed enough contracts in 22 years to know what I was looking at. The terms were clean, straightforward, nothing buried, nothing that shifted control away from me in the operating decisions. It was the kind of contract that someone writes when they actually trust the other person, not the kind designed to protect against them. I found myself thinking about Margaret. She had always been better than me at reading people. She had a way of sitting with someone for 10 minutes and then afterwards saying, very plainly, I don't like him, or she is the real thing. She had loved my father, too. She used to say Harold Caldwell was what a person looked like when there was no gap between who they were and who they showed the world. I thought about what she would make of Elliot Marsh, this thin, sharp-eyed man in a wheelchair by his window with his old photograph and his careful folders. I thought she would have liked him. I thought she would have said he was the real thing. I closed the documents. I went to find Thomas. Tell Mr. Marsh I would like to speak with him again tomorrow morning, I said. Thomas nodded. He will be pleased, he said, in a tone that suggested he had been reasonably confident this was coming. That night, I slept in a real bed for the first time in 4 days, and I want to tell you it was the best sleep of my life. But honestly, I was awake until 2 in the morning thinking about Douglas Finn and David Reyes and 41 employees who were now looking for work because of a chain of events that I was only beginning to understand the shape of. I fell asleep eventually. I dreamed about my father's blue pickup. I dreamed about a road in winter and the sound of an engine turning over in the cold. The next morning, I met with Elliot again, and this time I came with questions. Real questions. Not the polite kind, the kind where you're trying to figure out what a person actually is. I asked him about the board, the 7 members, how decisions were made, what it had done over 15 years, who it had moved against, and why, and what it had built. I asked him about Douglas Finn, specifically what Elliot knew, how he knew it, what the legal path looked like. Elliot answered everything. No deflecting, no vague reassurances. The kind of answers that took time because they were real. By the end of the second morning, I understood something. This was not charity. This was not even just about my father's gas can, though that was real. This was about a man at the end of his life looking at the architecture of what he had built and wanted to make sure it went somewhere that would not waste it. You have 6 other board members, I said. Why do you need me? Why not give the seat to someone already inside your world? He looked at me for a long moment. Because everyone inside my world knows the rules already, he said. They know how the game is played, and they're comfortable with how it is played. I need someone who just lost everything to a corrupt system and is still sitting in my library asking the right questions instead of just saying yes to the money. I need someone who has run payroll for 41 families for 22 years and never missed it. Not once, even when it was hard. He closed his folder. I need someone who knows what things are actually worth, Frank. Not what they cost, what they are worth. Your father knew that. I suspect you do too. I signed the agreement the following morning. Thomas witnessed it. Elliot shook my hand and held it for an extra moment with both of his, the grip of a man who is conserving strength. Now, he said, let me tell you what we know about Douglas Finn. What followed was 3 hours of information that I am not going to summarize entirely here, because some of it involves people who do not yet know they are about to face consequences, and I am not in the business of giving warnings. But I will tell you this. Douglas Finn had done what he did to my company through David Reyes as a deliberate test of a new method he had developed for insulating himself from liability. My company had been chosen specifically because we were mid-sized, privately held, and had a principal, meaning me, with a reputation for trying to handle things quietly. He had counted on me being too exhausted and too embarrassed to fight back. He had been counting on that pattern for years. He was not wrong about most of his targets. He was very wrong about me. The board met for the first time with me in it 11 days after I signed the agreement. We met in a building in downtown Cleveland that looked from the outside like an unremarkable professional services office. Inside, it was a different kind of ordinary, the kind of ordinary that is very deliberate, where nothing calls attention to itself because nothing needs to. 6 other men, ranging in age from 54 to 71. I had been given files on each of them. I had read every word. When I walked in, they were already seated. I sat in the empty chair, which happened to be at the head of the table because Elliot had told Thomas to seat me there. The other men looked at me with a range of expressions. One of them was openly skeptical. One was warmly curious. The rest were doing that thing that experienced people do, where they keep their faces professionally neutral while their eyes do all the actual assessment. Gentlemen, I said, I understand some of you have questions about how I ended up in this seat. So do I. Let's compare notes. The skeptical one laughed. Genuinely. It broke something loose in the room. The man to my right, a former federal judge named Henry Okafor, leaned forward and said, Elliot told us your father once gave him a gas can. He did, I said. My father had one in his truck every winter for 35 years. Filled it every October. Never thought twice about it. Henry nodded slowly. Remarkable, he said quietly. Over the next 2 weeks, I learned more about the mechanics of quiet power than I had learned in 63 years of working inside what I thought were normal systems. The board did not operate loudly. It never had. Its work was done in the space between official actions, in conversations that shaped the conditions before decisions were made, in the placing of certain information in front of certain people at certain times. I want to be careful here because I'm aware of how this can sound, and I will say plainly that in 15 years this group had not once done anything that crossed a legal line. Elliot had been very specific about that. The moment we operate outside the law, he had told me once, we become what we are trying to stop. We lose the only real advantage we have, which is being right. The case against Douglas Finn was already further along than I had realized when I joined. Henry Okafor had spent 2 years building a documentary trail through a network of former colleagues in the federal system. Another board member, a woman named Carol Staines who ran a forensic accounting firm, had followed the money through 4 shell entities across 3 states. They had been waiting, Elliot told me, for 2 things. First, a direct victim willing to go on record, not just in the civil system, but with a federal investigator they trusted. And second, a specific document that they believed existed and that would connect Finn directly to Reyes before Reyes ever came to me. I was the willing victim. That part was simple. The federal investigator they trusted, A woman named Agent Patricia Ewan, who had been working financial crimes for 16 years, met with me on a Tuesday in a coffee shop in Akron and spent 2.5 hours going through everything I knew. She was careful and thorough, and not once did she make me feel like what had happened was my fault, which I appreciated more than I said in the moment. The document, though, that was harder. They believed it existed in a physical form, an original signed agreement between Finn and Reyes that had been kept as mutual insurance by Reyes, because that was how Finn operated. He always gave his intermediaries just enough evidence to feel secure and just not quite enough to be safe. No one knew where Reyes was keeping it. That was where I came in, because I knew David Reyes. I had known him for 7 years. I knew that he kept things he did not trust in a small safety deposit box at a branch in Findlay, Ohio, because I had driven him there once when his car was being serviced, and he had made me wait outside for 10 minutes while he went in. He had been nervous the whole drive back, and I had thought nothing of it at the time. I mentioned this to Carol. She went very still in a very specific way. She said, "That is very helpful, Frank." She said it quietly, like someone who is not letting themselves react yet. I found out later that they had been trying to locate that document for 8 months. I do not know the full details of how the document was ultimately obtained because that is not my part of the story, and Carol was not forthcoming with specifics. What I know is that 6 weeks after that conversation, Agent Ewan contacted me to confirm that the federal investigation had reached a stage where she was confident it would proceed to charges. She said she expected it to move relatively quickly once the documentation package was complete. She also said, in the careful language of someone who has done this for a long time, that she believed the outcome would be comprehensive. Comprehensive. I wrote that word down. I looked at it for a while. Then I folded the paper and put it in the drawer of my desk in the farmhouse in Wayne County, where I had been living for 3 weeks. The farmhouse. I should tell you about the farmhouse. It was older than I had expected, built in the 1940s, with wide plank floors and windows that let in a particular quality of light in the afternoon that I can only describe as honest. The garden had been let go, but the bones of it were still there. Whoever had planted it originally had known what they were doing. I found irises and peonies and a climbing rose along the south fence that I recognized immediately because Margaret had grown the same variety. I stood in front of that rose for a long time the first afternoon. Then I went inside and made coffee and called Thomas to tell him I thought the house was going to be all right. He sounded genuinely pleased, which somehow meant a great deal. I want to tell you something about that time, those first weeks in the farmhouse, working with the board, helping with the Finn investigation, getting the new company framework drafted with Elliot's legal team. I want to tell you it felt triumphant, like a movie where the music swells and the main character stands on a hill looking out at the horizon. It did not feel like that. It felt like work. Important work, the kind that asked something real for me every day, but work. There were mornings when I woke up at 5 and lay in the dark thinking about the 41 people who had worked for me and wondering where they all were now and whether I had done enough to help them in the chaos of those first weeks. There were evenings when I sat at the kitchen table and felt Margaret's absence like a weather system. And there was Marcus. He had called twice since that Thursday evening on his porch. I had let both calls go to voicemail and listened to them later, alone, when I was ready. The first message was short and uncomfortable. He had heard I was doing better and wanted to know if I wanted to talk. The second was longer. His voice in the second one was different. Smaller, somehow. More like the kid who used to call me when his car broke down or when he had a hard day. He said he had been thinking a lot about that Thursday and that he was sorry and that he knew sorry was not enough and that Layla had been asking about Papa Bear. I listened to that second message 3 times. Then I sat with it for a while. This is the part people find surprising when I tell this story. I was not angry at Marcus. I want to be precise about this because it matters. I was not pretending not to be angry. I was genuinely not angry. What I felt was something more like sadness and also something that I can only describe as clarity. Marcus had made a choice under pressure, and the choice had revealed something that I needed to know about who he was at 32 years old, living his comfortable suburban life with his wife, who was navigating her mother's illness, and his little girl, who called me Papa Bear. He was not a bad person. He was a person who, when the stakes got high enough, had chosen the path of least resistance and had not yet learned what that cost. I had been 63 years old and sleeping in my car before I understood what his father was actually made of. Maybe he needed a version of that, too. Elliot passed away on a Wednesday morning, 31 days after I first walked into his sunroom. Thomas called me. I drove to the estate and sat in the chair by the window for a long time after everyone else had given me space. The oak trees were fully gold now. The light was doing that October thing where it comes in low and warm and makes everything look like a painting. I thought about my father on a road in December with a gas can and a man he had never met and would never see again. I thought about how my father had done that one ordinary act of decency 10,000 times in a life and never kept score and never expected anything back and never said a word about any of it, because that was simply not the kind of man he was. I thought about how that one ordinary act had apparently built, through a chain of events my father could never have imagined, a life for Elliot Marsh, who had built a board, who had sent Thomas to a driveway in Columbus, who had given me a farmhouse and a rose bush and a seat at a table and the means to rebuild 41 jobs. The geometry of it was dizzying if you looked at it directly. I stopped looking at it directly and just sat with it instead. The way you sit with things that are too large to hold, but too true to set down. I stayed at the estate for most of that day. Thomas and I had dinner in the kitchen, which felt right. He told me about how he had come to work for Elliot 20 years ago, a whole other chain of unlikely events, and I told him about Margaret and her irises and the way she had of being right about people. Douglas Finn was indicted 4 months later on 14 counts of wire fraud and financial conspiracy. The investigation had been quiet and very thorough, and when it moved all at once, the way these things do when they have been built carefully. David Reyes cooperated with investigators. The document from the Finley safety deposit box was central to the case. 3 other victims came forward once the initial charges were public. 2 of them I had not known about. One of them, a woman named Sandra Briggs, who had owned a small textile manufacturer in Indiana, had lost her business 6 years before mine. When I read her account, I had to put down the paper and walk outside for a while. Then I came back in and kept reading, because looking away is not the same as it not being true. I called Sandra Briggs. I want to be honest, I almost did not. I was not sure what I would say. But Henry Okafor had told me early on that one of the things people who have been through this kind of systematic harm need, more than almost anything else, is for someone to say clearly and directly, I know what happened to you, and it was not your fault, and you're not the only one, and it mattered. So I called her. We talked for an hour and 40 minutes. By the end of it, she was asking me about the board, about what it had built, about whether there was a way she could be involved in making sure this did not happen to someone else the way it had happened to us. I told her I would have a conversation with the other members. I already knew what they would say. The new company opened its doors in the spring. Smaller than before, we started with 20 employees, but we had a waiting list of 6 more who wanted to come back when we were ready for them. We were making components again, medical grade, the same work, the same standards. I had built a new facility about 12 miles from the old one. Different building, same idea. On the first morning, I stood in the middle of the floor before anyone else arrived, and I just listened to the building. The sound of an empty factory is actually very specific. All that potential space waiting to become noise and work and people. I thought about my father. I thought about 22 years. I thought about a car and a driveway and a man in a navy suit holding 2 cups of coffee in the cold morning air. Then I called Marcus. It was time. He picked up on the second ring. Dad, his voice. Hey, son. I said it simply. No weight in it. No edge. Just the plain fact of what it was. A long moment of quiet on the line. Dad, I am so sorry. For that night. I know, I said. I know you are. I was scared, he said. Tanya was already stressed, and I didn't know what to do, and I chose wrong. I know I chose wrong. You did, I said, and you're going to carry that for a while. That is how it works. But Marcus, you are 32 years old, and you are still figuring out who you are going to be in the hard moments. That is not a life sentence. That is just where you are right now. Silence. Ben, how are you? Like actually, I said, I have a farmhouse with a garden that is starting to come back. I have 20 employees who showed up this morning and got to work. I have a rose along my south fence that your mother will have loved. and I have a seat at a table with some very serious people who are doing something that I think matters. Another pause. That sounds like you, Marcus said. In his voice, when he said it was the voice of someone who is realizing something about a person they thought they already knew. It does, I agreed. Bring Layla to see the garden when the roses bloom. I want to tell her about her grandmother. He said he would. I believed him. Not because I was choosing to be naive, because I was choosing to leave a door open. What he does with that is his part of the story now. Here is what I know now that I did not know 13 months ago. Rock bottom is not a destination. It is a floor, and some floors, it turns out, are load-bearing. My father drove a truck his whole life and kept a gas can in the bed every winter because he believed in being useful to strangers. He never made a lot of money. He never had his name on a building. He lived quietly and generously and well. And then he died, and 9 years later his son was sleeping in a car in a driveway, wondering what his life had amounted to. And the answer, it turns out, was more than he ever knew. More than either of us knew. There's a message somewhere in that, and I think you already know what it is. Thank you for being here on Daddy's Revenge. If this story meant something to you, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. I will see you in the next one.